Cain the first to kill. The woman who carried the seed of the cast out. The descendants of the cast out. The women who were chosen. The flood when God washed the garment of humanity. The legacy of the women. The woman in the promise. From silence to calling. No more paradise. No more family. No way back. He became the first to be pulled from the Creator's embrace, and the first to be called cursed by the world. But in that strange land, he did not die. He lived, and he had a wife, a line that sounds ordinary, but within its silence lies an untold mystery, because that wife has no name, no age, no introduction, not a single line in the genealogy of mankind. Just a blank space, a gap in history, a woman, forgotten. And from that silence, humanity began to multiply. Welcome to Prayer Station. So who was she? A sister? A younger sibling? Or one born after everything, yet never spoken of? The world has no answer. The Bible gives no name. We only know one thing. She was there, in a place where everyone turned away, but she chose to remain, beside the one marked by destruction. And from that silent moment, life began again. Do you see it? Sometimes, the one not named is the one who shapes history. There are those erased from the text, yet carved into the destiny of mankind. And if you've ever felt forgotten, then you are living the story of that unnamed woman. Because ahead is the whisper of a hidden memory, where life began in silence, and grace still flows quietly through the one never called by name. Cain, the first to kill, and still be allowed to live. Cain was not a side character. He was humanity's firstborn. When Eve held him in her arms, she said, "I have brought forth a man with the help of the Lord." What seemed like hope became the beginning of the first tragedy. Cain grew up caught between two extremes. One was a voice from heaven, the other an unnamed restlessness within. When his brother's offering was accepted, and his was not, a silent fracture appeared. Not just from jealousy, but from not understanding why his heart was rejected. And when there was no explanation, he chose to solve it with blood. One strike, one cry, one brother fell, and the first dream of mankind shattered. It wasn't just a murder, it was an assault on life itself. The life that God had given. You would think judgment would come instantly, but God did not kill him. He placed a mark on him, not as forgiveness, but as protection for someone who should have been destroyed. Because God is not only just, He is the one who opens doors for those who are broken. And so Cain went away, carrying a curse, carrying loneliness, carrying the sound of earth crying out from blood. He no longer belonged to the community. No more altars, no more paradise, only himself, and a future without shape. But right in the midst of that darkness, a quiet line appears, and Cain knew his wife. A sentence that seems like nothing, yet it silenced the heavens, because in the gloom of one cast out from God's presence, a woman came near. She was not introduced. We don't know where she came from, only this: she stepped into the place no one dared approach. Not an angel, not a righteous one, but a woman, standing before the one who killed his own blood and choosing not to turn away. The first life outside the garden was conceived not from holiness, but from the endurance of a woman and the unhealed wound of a man. And if you think God only makes history through the perfect, look at Cain and ask yourself, who would be brave enough to embrace a shattered soul and call it home? Because there are some who never needed to be named, yet their silent presence wove the destiny of generations. And she is waiting for us to step into the next part of the story. She, the woman who carried the seed of the cast-out one. She had no name, no introduction, not a single line of description in the sacred chronicles. Only one thing we know: she stepped into Cain's life at the very moment he was no longer anyone in the eyes of heaven. And that says everything. No woman born of Adam and Eve came without weight in the bloodline of humanity, but she was the first to carry the shadow of a man who had lost divine favor. She wasn't born to be a queen. She didn't carry a great mission like Mary would one day. She didn't have prayers echoing through the temple halls. But she was the one who embraced a man no longer named by heaven, not because she had no choice, but because she saw something inside the man who had once killed his own brother. She entered Cain's life, not as a gift, but as a miracle only pain could be worthy to receive. This is not a love story. It is a story of companionship in the dark. She conceived and gave birth, a lineage not recorded in the biblical genealogy, a generation cut off from the original promise, a branch that lived outside the circle of light. And strangely, they lived. They built cities. They gave rise to the first civilizations. They birthed those who pioneered trades, technology, the arts. Things that were supposed to come from the holy line were instead birthed from a nameless woman and a man stripped of blessing. Could it be? There was a plan, even in the shadows. Could it be? The forsaken ground was the softest soil for seeds of creation. She didn't ask why she had to carry that silence. She simply walked, every day, carrying a new life inside her, not born from grace, but from courage. And if you've ever felt like the one standing outside every promise, if you've ever carried the consequences of someone else's mistakes, if you've ever been labeled with things you never chose, then this story is not foreign to you. It is you, because life doesn't always begin with perfection. It often begins with the quiet choice of someone who didn't turn away. Because ahead we will follow one of her children, one who carried within him the tearing between the curse of the father and the silence of the mother, the descendants of the cast out, the bloodline that built the world. We often think that goodness is born only from the blessed, but the paradox begins here, not from the descendants of Seth, the holy line that would lead to Noah, but from the very bloodline marked by the first murder. A child is born, continuing the curse, yet becoming the first to grow up outside Eden, where every breath is a lesson in loss. That child didn't carry heaven's hope, but bore the memory of a world that once knew light. That generation grew up and gave birth to more. Layers of people were born in the land of Nod, a place without the presence of God, yet still held laboring hands, still dreamed, still slept under moonlight that touched the foreheads of unblessed children. And from there, something unexpected happened. They, the descendants of Cain, were the first to ignite civilization. One named Jubal, the father of those who play the harp and flute. Another Tubal-Cain crafted tools from bronze and iron. A woman named Nama, a rare name spoken like a flower blooming in chaos. The first civilization wasn't birthed from the place guarded by angels, but from the place shut out of heaven. No altars, no covenants, no prophecies, only broken people and a will that refused to die. This is not a replacement for the promise, but a testimony that God doesn't only write history through light. He can allow life to rise from ashes, not to glorify sin, but to remind humanity, even those cast out, can birth what shapes the generations to come. And while the holy line lived in silence, the line of Cain echoed loudly. Music, craft, technology, thought, everything we call progress, originated in a land without a temple. But that would not last forever, because success can never cover a broken root. And while they built, they also drifted further from the true source of life. A child born from that line, named Lamech, would become a turning point, a man who gave himself the right to kill, then composed a song to glorify his own vengeance. Civilization doesn't only create beauty, it can also write anthems of death. And from here, a quiet question begins to rise. Could it be that what man calls civilization is actually the signal of a flood in the soul? Ahead is the moment women become the objects of desire, and the human soul becomes the battlefield for forces beyond mankind. The women who were chosen, a warning from within the line of Cain. When a woman chooses a man, it is love. But when a woman is chosen by forces beyond humanity, it is an alarm bell. We often think that women in the Bible are just gentle figures beside great men. But there was a time they were no longer companions. They became targets, not because they were weak, but because within a woman is something darkness wants to claim. It is the power to create life. It is the ability to hold a soul in her womb and birth a lineage. That is why the women from the line of Cain were no longer just wives, mothers, sisters. They became gates, gates left unguarded, where foreign powers looked in and said, "I will plant my seed in them." This was no longer human bloodline, but a fusion between soul and what does not belong to this realm. A generation of women was drawn into a battle they were never warned about. No one warned them. No one protected them. No one told them that once they were chosen, they would carry children that did not belong to the order of creation. And then those children were born, tall, strong, strangely intelligent, and from a young age carried whispers of a power not from earth. The whole earth began to shake. Not from weapons, not from war, but from a generation that had been mixed between supernatural intellect and hearts without morality, mixed between the image of the Creator and the rebellious nature of those once cast out of heaven. And it all began with women who were chosen, but never asked. Maybe they cried, maybe they screamed in the night, when they felt an invasion they couldn't name creeping into their souls. But they had no language to describe it. They only knew they were carrying something inside them that was not quite human. And when those children were born, they couldn't refuse the role of mother. They cared, they loved, they comforted, but deep within them there was always a silent question. Is this what I was born to raise? That question still echoes today, in the hearts of women who feel chosen for roles they don't understand, in the minds of mothers who give birth to children so different, whose souls seem to come from somewhere far away. And if you are one of them, chosen by something you don't understand, drawn into a current beyond your personal choice, then you are hearing the echo of those first women. They had no names, they had no voice in the holy books, but their eyes saw what the whole world should fear. And ahead is the wrath of the one who has seen enough, not just because mankind has fallen, but because women have been turned into gates for rebellion. The flood. When God washed the garment of humanity, there was once a day when the sky could no longer bear it, not because sin was too much, but because the condition of the human soul had changed beyond return. Something had broken. It was no longer human, no longer the original image, no longer a harmony between earth and heaven. Humanity now like a white garment stained by hundreds of foreign inks. No clean patch left to mend, no original thread to remember. And the one who made that garment, he did not throw it away. He washed it with water with tears, with wrath mingled with mercy. He did not destroy mankind because he hated them. He washed them because he wanted to preserve what was truly human. And among the mixed sea of people, he found only one soul, a man not perfect, but still listening to his voice. That man was Noah. He did not build a temple, did not perform miracles, did not preach on mountaintops. He just built a boat, out of wood, out of faith, out of the world's ridicule. While people mocked, children threw stones at a ship that had never seen water, and the crowd laughed that such rain would never come. He still nailed each plank, hammered every nail, and believed in something never seen, but surely coming, because he could still hear the whisper of God. And during that time, on hilltops where weddings were held for the hybrids, beneath rooftops where women gave birth to children with strange eyes, in the first cities where metal, music, and power were blended, no one noticed the color of the sky had changed. No one heard the water moving underground. No one sensed the Creator preparing to cover all with the very element that had made them. Water. No one, except one man and his family. On the night before the first rain, perhaps Noah looked toward the setting sun, said nothing, just quietly shut the ark's door. There was no loud wind, no lightning flash, just one drop of water falling to the ground, then another, then hundreds, then thousands. The sky wept, not out of rage, but out of sorrow, out of love, out of the pain of letting everything be swept away to begin again. And in those waters were the bodies of children, half human, half something. The cries of women once chosen but never protected. The songs of Cain's line drowned in the silence of water. No more flutes, no more bronze, no more revenge ballads of Lamech. Only the sound of wood striking, and a small family drifting in the water, holding on to the last piece, still called Heaven's Own. End of quote. But this was not the end, because inside the heart of Noah's wife and the 3 daughters-in-law were still traces of the first women. And if you think water can wash everything clean, you've forgotten that soul wounds don't wash away with water. They lie still, for a long time, waiting for another day to rise again. The legacy of the women, what they passed on after the flood. When the ark door opened, it wasn't just the moment humans stepped back onto dry land. It was the beginning of a new memory, carrying the shadow of the old. People often remember Noah as the chosen one, as the father of a post-flood generation. But few pause to ask, those women, Noah's wife and the 3 daughters-in-law, what did they carry in their hearts? No one tells the story from their side. No words of theirs were recorded. No prayers, no sighs, only silence. Pregnant with a legacy. Because those women, they didn't just bear children for a new world. They carried the aftershock of the old world. Nameless wounds, untold stories, eyes that had once seen their sisters chosen and then forgotten. Perhaps they had seen other women forced, had heard the cries in the night from tents where souls were mingled with supernatural power. And now, on new ground, they bore children, with trembling hands, with hearts still echoing the sound of water sweeping all away. But there was one thing the water could not sweep away: memory. And that very memory flowed into the veins of the next generation, not as a story told, but as a current of feeling a silent fear that something remained unresolved. So after the flood, there was still chaos. After the flood, there was still rebellion, because the root wasn't in flesh, but in soul. And those women, though faithful, though silent, could not stop the darkness that slipped through unseen cracks. Perhaps they once looked into the eyes of their children and wondered, do you carry something that does not belong to the Heavenly Father? And those very questions with no answers wove the fabric for the rest of human history. From those children, there would be ones who built cities. There would be ones who defied God. There would be ones who raised towers into the heavens, as if to reclaim the power once lost in the floodwaters. And in the midst of it all, the women still giving birth, still raising, still comforting, with an unnamed fear whispering, one day, the old will return. Not with water, but with blood, with an ancient promise that one would come to crush the serpent's head and rescue the woman from her generational pain, the woman in the promise. A bloodline hunted from the beginning. There was once a promise spoken in the ashes of Eden, a promise not given to kings, nor to priests, but handed to a woman, the first to carry both brokenness and hope. Your offspring will crush the serpent's head, a sentence that seemed as light as breath, yet opened a bloodline hunt that would span thousands of years. From that moment on, the enemy didn't just seek to destroy mankind. He sought to destroy the woman, or distort the lineage born from her, because he knew a child would come born of a woman and would end all the darkness he had sown. And from then on, every time a woman became pregnant, the heavens trembled, not because of a baby's cry, but because the enemy didn't know which child would be the promised one. He deceived Cain to kill his brother, believing Abel carried the bloodline. He corrupted Seth's descendants, luring them into marriages with wicked nations. He used Pharaoh to slaughter every newborn Hebrew boy, but one floated past him in a basket on a river. He stirred Haman to command the total annihilation of the Jewish people, but didn't expect a woman to rise and overturn the decree. He always struck at the woman, because the woman bore the doorway for the Messiah. The woman was never a side character in the story of redemption. She was the path through which the promise would take form. She carried life not just through her womb, but through her faith, her tears, her courage to cling to hope in the deepest night. And for that, she was hated, silenced, erased from the records, called nameless, even while her blood flowed in the veins of redemption. Because don't you know, it wasn't only Mary, mother of Jesus, who was chosen, but every woman before her, Eve, Sarah, Rahab, Gomer, Ruth, each held a link in that chain of destiny, a link forged with tears and the price of life. And if you listen closely, you'll hear in each of their stories a quiet voice saying, "Hold on, because from the darkest place, light will be born, a name not in the book, but engraved in heaven's heart." There are those who will never be mentioned in the books. No genealogy, no monuments, no memorials, and no name. Like the daughters of Adam, they don't have a single line recounting their childhood. No one wrote down their first laugh. No one recorded the look in their eyes when they saw their mother cry over Abel's death. But if heaven has ever quietly watched, then surely God saw those women grow up in the emptiness of brokenness. They walked between two worlds. One side sin not yet named, the other a promise still far away. They had no prophecy, no angels appeared, no miracles happened around them, only ordinary days, drawing water from deep wells, kneading dough in their hands, hearing a baby cry through the night, and silence. But that silence was not the absence of God. It was where He wrote their names, not on parchment, not in manuscripts, but on His heart. Because not everyone written in history has a place in eternity, and not everyone forgotten by man is forgotten by God. Maybe you're like them. No one knows your name. No one praises you. No one hears your 3 a.m. prayers when your tears soak the pillow. But there is a book, silently opened, a hand that once engraved your name into its palm, and a voice calling you back to your true identity. not a name lost in a family tree, but a sacred thread tied to the one who made the promise from the beginning. The woman thought to be forgotten, but in truth, she holds the living promise. The woman thought to be invisible, but in truth, she is where light hides from the dark to begin again. The woman thought to just bear children, but in truth, she guards the line of life from breaking. And if you're still reading this, maybe your soul belongs to that lineage too. Not by blood, not by apostleship, but because you carry a name not found in books, yet engraved in heaven's heart. If you can still hear that whisper, pause. And let me tell you this in the final part. A last invitation, a whisper not from me, but from the one who's waited through every season of your life. Are you ready to listen? From silence to calling, there are stories that are never told. Not because they aren't important, but because they're too sacred to be thrown into lifeless letters. The story of the first daughters, the women without names, who carried the first scars of humanity and the first pulse of hope. They didn't cry out to be remembered. They didn't demand glory. They simply lived, quietly, but sacredly, as if their very existence was a prayer. And in that silence, God spoke. He spoke through tears. He spoke through lineage. He spoke through doors opened from within a woman's womb. No one saw them, but because of them, all of heaven saw you. Because without those women, the Savior could not come. The cross could not be raised. The resurrection could not happen. And you would not have the chance to hear this calling today. So don't stay silent anymore. If you've ever thought you were nameless, if you've ever felt left behind, if you've ever lived like no one has written your life down, then today, I want you to know, your name has been engraved not in a book, but in the very heart of the one who carried all of humanity on his shoulders. Step out of that darkness, not for glory, only for truth. Let God touch the wound you've never dared to open. Let him call your name the one only heaven knows. The name Adam may have forgotten, but heaven never did. If you're ready to return, click subscribe. Share this video with someone living in forgetfulness. And together, let us write the pages never told, but always remembered by God. You are still loved, and the story is still unfolding.